Welcome to my third evidence. In here you will learn a lot of concepts and some questions will be answered. So keep on here, take some candies and let's start with the video. Alright, so let's start. Globalization. Globalization is a process of interaction and integration among the people, companies, and governments of different nations, a process driven by international trade and investment and aided by information technology. This process has effects on the environment, on culture, on political systems, on economic development and prosperity, and on human physical well-being in societies around the world. Globalization is deeply controversial, however. Proponents of globalization argue that it allows poor countries and their citizens to develop economically and raise their standards of living, while opponents of globalization claim that the creation of an unfettered international free market has benefited multinational corporations in the Western world at the expense of local enterprises, local cultures, and common people. Resistance to globalization has therefore taken shape both at a government level as people and governments try to manage the flow of capital, labor, goods, and ideas that constitute the current wave of globalization. Now let's move on to digital revolution. In here you will see some years and some explanation according to the year. So let's start. The digital revolution refers to the advancement of technology from analog electronic and mechanical devices to the digital technology available today. The era started during the 80s and is ongoing. The digital revolution also marks the beginning of the information era. The development and advancement of technology started with one fundamental idea. Guess what it is? The Internet. The transistor, which was introduced in 1948, paved the way for the development of advanced digital computers. The government, military, and other organizations made use of computer systems during the 50s and 60s. Now, let's start. Then, first, in the 80s, the computer became a familiar machine, and by the end of the decade, being able to use one became a necessity for many jobs. By 1992, the World Wide Web had been introduced, and by 1996, the Internet became a normal part of most business operations. By the 2010 and beyond, by this decade, Internet makes up of more than 25% of the world's population. Mobile communication has also become very important. Did you know that nearly 70% of the world's population owns a mobile phone? Now let's talk about another topic, trade. You know what trade is? Trade is a basic economic concept involving the buying and selling of goods and services, with compensation paid by a buyer to a seller or the exchange of goods or services between parties. The most common medium of exchange for these transactions is money, but trade may also be executed with the exchange of goods or services between both parties. You may have already done it too. Money, which also functions as a unit of account and a store of value, is the most common medium of exchange, providing a variety of methods for fund transfers between buyers and sellers, including cash, ACH transfers, credit cards, and wire funds. Money's attribute as a store for value also provides assurance that funds received by sellers as payment for goods or services can be used to make purchases of equivalent value in the future. Wholesale trade is defined as the sale of goods that are sold as merchandise to retailers or industrial, commercial, institutional, or other professional business users, or to other wholesalers and related subordinated services. Terrorism. The systematic use of violence to create a general climate of fear in a population and thereby to bring about a particular political objective is the definition of terrorism. Terrorism has been practiced by political organizations with both right and leftist objectives. Definitions of terrorism are usually complex and controversial, and because of the inherent ferocity and violence of terrorism, the term in its popular usage has developed an intense stigma. Terrorism is not legally defined in all jurisdictions. The statutes that do exist, however, generally share some common elements. Terrorism involves the use or threat of violence and seeks to create fear. In order to attract and maintain the publicity necessary to generate widespread fear, terrorists must engage in increasingly dramatic, violent, and high-profile attacks. These have included hijackings, hostage-takings, kidnapping, car bombings, and frequently suicide bombings. The goal of terrorism generally is to destroy the public sense of security in the places most familiar to them. Nowadays, it's really common to wake up and to hear about another attack that occurred in some country. That's why the importance of analyzing what globalization is about and if it has something to do with this. Now that we already defined the concepts, we will be talking more about the globalization. And now I'm going to describe you how positively and negatively globalization influences the world in relation to the developed and developing countries. The first one I will say that is that there are more efficient markets. Why? Because if you can improve the way you produce a good or a service by doing things such as outsourcing certain process or buying from an overseas supplier that offers discounts, you can then afford to lower your selling price, which results in increased demand and affordability. The second reason why this is something positive is because of the increased competition. Any time that you have multiple producers competing for hold of the economy, that's a good sign for consumers as the quality of goods and services often goes up as a result. The next point is culture. The positive effects of globalization on culture are many. Not all good practices were born in one civilization, you may know. The world that we live in today is a result of several cultures coming together. People of one culture, if receptive, tends to see the flaws in the culture and pick up the culture which is more correct or in tune with the times. This is like more personal. Then another benefit is the legal effects. Increased media coverage draws the attention of the world to human rights violations. This leads to improvement in human rights. Global economic growth does not necessarily make people happier. Worldwide free trade should also benefit humanity as well as protect nature, not just reward managers and stockholders. Those who will be authentic leaders need to address inequalities. Globalization should promote openness and information along with exchange with greater democracy and prosperity. But that's not it. Now we need to discuss the negative effects of this. The first one will be jobs insecurity. In developed countries, people have jobs insecurity. People are losing their jobs. developed nations have outsourced manufacturing and white-collar jobs. That means less jobs for their people. This is because the manufacturing work is outsourced to countries where the cost of manufacturing goods and wages are lower than in their countries. The second one will be poverty. Some United Nations members, including the Vatican City, claim that globalization increases poverty amongst young people, the old, women, indigenous people, and migrants, which has cultural impact. A representative from Cuba said one result of globalization was that 20% of the world population consumed 80% of global production, leaving 80% of the population in increased poverty. Did you know that? Now let's talk about something a little bit dangerous. That's environment. If the rules and regulations regarding protection of the environment is less underdeveloped countries or developed countries can manufacture products that may harm the environment and no one cares about that because they are all seeking to have or to be the best they can. So they stop caring about the environment. Then we'll be alone. Large Western-driven organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank make it easy for a developing country to obtain a loan. However, a Western focus is often applied to a non-Western situation, resulting in failed progress. Let's move on to another important question. What is the WTO? What are its objectives? How are the rules established? When was integrated? And how many countries make it up? So the importance of this organization will be next. So we will start with the data. The WTO was founded on January 1st in 1995. It stands for the World Trade Organization. WTO is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations, and its heart are the WTO agreements, negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading nations and ratified in their parliaments. So, what is the goal? The goal is to help producers of goods and services, exporters, and importers conduct their business. The WTO has 6 key objectives. The first one is to set and enforce rules for international trade. The second one is to provide a forum for negotiating and monitoring further trade liberalization. The third one is to resolve trade disputes. And the fourth one is to increase the transparency of decision-making processes, although shared by the GATT. In practice, these goals have been pursued more comprehensively by the WTO. The WTO has over 160 members, representing 98% of world trade. Over 20 countries are seeking to join the WTO. These steps for establishing, enabling, enforcing, and acting under the laws of WTO are judgment, counterclaims, provisional measures of protection, and intervention. The importance of the WTO is that it operates a global system of trade rules. It acts as a forum for negotiating trade agreements. It settles trade disputes between its members and it supports the needs of developing countries, and without it the trade in the world will be harder and there will be less trade of products and even less exchange. The next question is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the digital revolution in today's society? Because we are all part of the society, so it's important to know what is affecting us and what is not. So the advantages will be that the digital revolution links individuals and groups together, you may know. Never before have we being able to communicate real time with others in distant corners of the world. And this advantage is not limited to our international communication. We now have instant access to our friends and family members a few miles away. Unlike traditional telephones, cell phones have brought this communication power into our hands in the most remote locations. The digital revolution has created tools that are catalysts for sharing ideas. No longer do you need to be the executive of a wealthy business in order to share your thoughts with others on a broad scale. Using social media and common technologies, ideas can be shared and innovation can be accelerated. Similarly, we now have a world of online opportunity. Startup companies can be in a bedroom with a single laptop. Jobs can be obtained and work in the back of a truck deep in the forest. You can find and purchase rare books through online services without getting out of it. While not all may appreciate it, the digital revolution forces competitiveness on a global scale. Prior to the revolution, stores only need to compete with other stores in the region. And well, not everything shines, right? So the disadvantages are many too. But let's see what you think about. Disadvantages are that a whole family can now live in a single house and yet live like single people because this revolution breaks down many relationships and our sense of community. While we can maintain friendships in distant states and countries, it breaks down all those friendships which are not actively fostered in the digital realm. When you get on a bus or train full of people on their smartphones, it reveals this sad truth that everyone is connected, but only to those whom they choose to connect with. Funny, right? Similarly, digital technology breaks apart our sense of political and regional community. This has been in decay for some time now, but the information age is tearing it apart faster than ever. The idea that we can choose our friends through social media and stay connected with only those, without spending time with those who live and interact around us, tears down the idea that we live in a community in a special place in the world. It tears down the idea that we need our neighbors on a political level, which prepares for the abuse of democracy. Finally, the digital realm encourages pacifism rather than discrimination. Having information presented on a screen welcomes viewers to sit back, accept the message that is presented, and move on without time for reflection. While movies and media all communicate messages, digital electrons have a strange way of obscuring that fact and encouraging passive consumerism. Television has been around for some time, but only multiplied the problem. As we already mentioned what tourism is, I give you an introduction about it, so I think that now is a good idea to move to this question. How do you think technology benefits or affects tourism? The modern terrorism is instantaneous and unpredictable, a global threat that hits its targets but at the same time hits a wide audience, thanks to the technology, and it is bringing the terror into our homes. The cyberspace is an environment without boundaries, a privileged place where tourists find resources, make propaganda activities, and from which it is possible to launch their attacks against enemies everywhere in the world. Every terrorist attack is similar to a dramatic representation in which the internet is the stage. Terrorist attacks are often carefully choreographed to attract the attention of the electronic media and the international press. Terrorism is aimed at people watching, not at the actual victims. Terrorism groups currently use computer technology to facilitate traditional forms of suicide activity. Quite simply, They are exploiting modern tools to perform common terrorist actions, such as internal communication and coordination, propaganda and misinformation, recruitment and financing, information and intelligence gathering. The use of the Internet for propaganda purposes is particularly popular. Radical opposition groups such as Hezbollah and Zapatistas use it regularly to communicate their revolutionary programs. Various neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups in the United States also use the World Wide Web to recruit supporters and collect finance. All of what you see on your profile, all of what you get to see and to know through the media is what creates you the fear. So you know something and you tell to a family and they get afraid of too. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something, some concept, something about globalization, trade, of the digital revolution, tourism. So everything was explained and the questions were answered. So I hope you can get something from here because this involves soul. It is not something that is just passing or that will pass. It's about our society, about what we are going on through all together. So I think it's important because even if you try to ignore what's going on around you, it won't make it change, and it doesn't mean it won't affect you too. So thank you for being informed and keep on looking around you because things are happening and you can do something about it.